Good evening to one and all present here. I'm Mohit Jain from BMSc IEEE Student Branch.
you don't know what they're talking about anyway. So this is not meant to be a complete overview of it, but just to give you an idea of what signal processing is, you're going to need this. So pay attention. Um, Anything you measure around you in the world is a signal. Uh, so one person knew signal processing and they left. Okay, good. Okay, so data, whatever you see around your world, wherever you have a signal, you can do something with it. And these signals, so you can make inferences about them. For instance, the simplest example of this is human signal processing. Somebody's in a hospital, and then they have this monitor attached to their heart, and it measures their heart rate. And they've just gone through a surgery, so the heart rate, it's very important that the heart rate be stable. So depending on their age and their general physical condition, there is a there's an accepted range of heart rate for them. So once it goes either lower or higher than that, the machine actually beeps. Once it goes into a red territory, which is very bad, then the doctors are alerted and they come in and try to save the patient at that point. That is the simplest example of one machine reacting to your heart rate and doing something about it. By doing something about it, in this case, it pages the doctor, gets the doctor to you. Okay, so that happens. That is the simplest form of signal processing. If you've gotten a CT scan, or if you know somebody who's gotten a CT scan or an MRI image, that's another place where you use a lot of signal processing. Um, so this happens in very many. This happens like 40 times, 50 times in your day on average without you even knowing it. Your phone has a bunch of signal processing. If you use modern smartphones, you have features such as voice isolation. That's on my iPhone right now. But if you have a different phone, like a Google phone, they have a new feature called voice focus or clear calling. When you're talking to somebody on your phone and there is a bus that goes by and it's very loud, but you're on an important call, your new smartphones can actually filter out the sounds that they hear, the other people hear in the background. So it has to understand what sound you're making as a speaker on the phone and what sounds your background's making, which it can take away. So then you have this example of audio source separation. We are going to end up using techniques like this if we do the hearing aid project. One of the projects is how you convert a set of earbuds or AirPods into a hearing aid, customized for people's hearing profiles. Um, the bag, nobody, a lot, not most times, there are a few exceptions. Most times, you don't want to know what's happening in the background. That's not always true. One example where that's not true is when there's an emergency warning, and then you want to hear it, even if it's in the background. An example is when a fire truck is passing by, or when an emergency vehicle or an ambulance is passing by. You want to know. Even if you're on the call, you kind of want to hear that. So we need to understand where different sources of sounds are coming from and classify them, and then try to suppress them or keep them. The general form of most of signal processing and modern day machine learning. Machine learning is an outgrowth of what used to be called signal processing. People don't use this much these days. It's because it's not fashionable, because everybody wants to do AI. But guess what? You're going to be bad AI engineers if you don't understand the basic equations of signal processing. So we'll talk a little about it. But the equation you see at the bottom left is the simplest form of modern day machine learning and signal processing. Again, I'll give you some examples. So you have a data that you observe based, you have a sensor, and the sensor is picking up on some signal. It's audio, video, or a picture, or whatever it is. And then there's the actual signal, which is X. So the Y is what you see, X is what the actual signal is, and Y is not equal to X. Ideally, you want Y equals X. Whatever the signal is, you want to see it. But in real life, there is a distortion that changes the signal. So you see something slightly different. One other example of this is okay, maybe I'll show this on the next slide. Um, right now, maybe we don't have to worry too much about this, but at some point, um, we will. This is not your average BMS stuff. What I mean by that is we will care about every single thing, every single letter of equations that we write. Um, so when you say X, I'm just going to give you one example. I'm not going to go through all of these because we don't have time, and it's a waste of your time as well for now. But we've got to be very, very, very precise mathematically how we represent things in our equations, and therefore in our machine learning algorithms. If X is your signal, I'll give you an example of the Y equals phi of X. You take a picture on your phone in it's dark. It's not very bright. So it's 7 o'clock. I don't know what time sunset's about 6:30 probably, right? And so this is a little after sunset. So it's a little dark. I mean, so I don't know if you've experimented with low light photography, but one of the main problems, your cameras work the way they do because they capture the reflected light off of different things. So when you're taking a selfie, there is sunlight that's reflected off of your face, and that light is being captured by your smartphone lens. It goes into your lens of the camera, of your front-facing camera, for instance. And then so there's a you've got to learn to think in terms of systems, what really happens. And so in this example, you have a lens, the light reflected from your face goes into the lens, and then refraction happens at the lens. Excuse me. So refraction uses something in optics. You have something called Snell's law. I don't want to talk about Snell's law. Snell's apostrophe S, I think. So a guy called Snell, I guess, discovered it that when light's passing from one substance, one medium like air, and it's passing into the glass of your lens, the glass has a different refractive index, so the light actually bends. Same thing happens when you're looking down into a swimming pool because light's passing from air into water, and so that's a different refractive index. Um, okay, in any case, so light bends, it goes into the photoreceptors of your camera. It's something like the retina of your eyes, and that's the equivalent of it. And then, so light is a very analog signal, which means it's continuous. Light has waves, and these waves are continuous, and they have a frequency and an intensity. So the analog signal is converted to a digital signal using what's called an A to D converter, analog to digital converter. And then you have a digital signal, but that's far from perfect. They need to do a lot of other things like process them for magnitude correction and so forth. But so if you're interested in this, read up something called the camera imaging pipeline. They need to do gamma corrections. They need to do, it's called a demosaicing, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get into that, but there's so much that happens. And then there's some software that does things like blur correction. If you shake your hand a little bit when you're taking a picture, you're getting a very blurry picture. I'm sure all of you, this has happened to all of us, right? Um, if you take a picture when it's somewhat dark and you're not turning your flash on, you're still taking a picture because it's not fully dark, then you have a problem with noise. Your picture is going to be super noisy. Um, Read up on it on Wikipedia or somewhere if you're interested. So there is noise, and your smartphone actually tries to remove the noise before it gives you the final picture. So there's a lot of processing that happens in the background from the time that lights reflects off of your face and the time you see a picture in your photo gallery in your phone. Many things happen. So we're going to talk, and signal processing is interested in those many things that happen and how we fix them. And the many things that happen are represented by this function phi, which is a distortion function. So in general, if you have a 12, let's say most of the new phones seem to have a 12 megapixel sensor on the camera. My phone has a 12. So what my phone does is different. Um, just for just as an example, I have an iPhone 14 Pro. So this phone has multiple cameras, and the phones are clever enough to fuse multiple sources of multiple signals. You're getting one signal from each camera. So my phone has three cameras on the back. Not all cameras are used at the same time, but whatever you get, there is something that happens when you fuse them together. So signals can be fused together. We'll talk more about it once we start the project series. However, um, let's assume, so I have the main camera on my phone has a 48 megapixel sensor. What that means is light that's coming in, that's fine. It bends, like I said, at the lens. And then there is a background on which the light actually lands. That's like I said, it's like your retina, right? The human retina has an approximate resolution of 130 megapixels. Mega is 10 to the 6. So that's 1 million. 1 million would be, I think, 10 lakh for you. I think, yes. 10 lakh pixels is 1 million pixels. That's 1 megapixel. So if you have 12 megapixels, you have 12 million pixels in your camera sensor. Like I said, the human eye sensor has about 130, give or take. It varies with everybody. It's a little different. However, so you have 12 million pixels, and let's say you are taking a 3 by 4 image, which is the aspect ratio. The height of the image, the ratio of the height of the image to the width of the image is 3 is to 4. So that's your 3 by 4 image. So you can divide your 12 million into into a 3 by 4 grid, right? So once you have that, that's a rectangular image you get, and that's the shape of your signal vector X. So in this case, Y is the distorted image you get. It's the blurry, noisy, dark, horrible looking image you get. And X is the very clean looking image that your camera produces after doing a lot of noise correction, blur correction, and so forth. So X is your nice picture, Y is the dirty picture, okay? And phi is the distortion function. So that represents the actual blur, for instance, or the noise. Okay, so the first thing we do in a lot of analysis is we flatten those images. So instead of saying it's a rectangular image, you do, okay, if you don't know what this phrase means, Google it up or go to Wikipedia. It's called rastering. It's spelled R-A-S as in Suhas, Tering. So you raster an image, a rectangular image, and then you make it one dimensional. Instead of a 2D image, you make it one dimensional by flattening it out. So when you see a notation like this, the first line, you see the signal vector. So these are the different components. X is your clean image that you want. The next symbol means belongs to. We'll talk about that in a bit. And then the R is the real numbers because your image can be a real number. Sometimes it can be an integer. But remember, um, light is analog, so it's a real number. The waves are real numbers. They're not integers. And then n cross one means the cross one means it's one dimensional. And okay, and the n means that there are n pixels. So in this case, if you take a 12 megapixel sensor, the n is 12 million. And okay, so you have a space of all real numbers on the real line where each point on the real line is a 12 megapixel vector. Um, your x lies in that space. That's what the belongs to means. So for every individual signal, you can write the exact dimensions of it. And that will matter in the future because I want you to be precise. Do we have people on the call? I see people leaving. Okay, we still have some people. Okay, good. Okay, let me stop here. Um, and then have you ask me something. I don't feel comfortable with silence. Or say something in the chat so I know you're following this. Okay, that's somebody's following. Okay, good. Good. Okay. All right. So, there again, like there are multiple types of distortions. Oh, missing data is interesting because I don't know if you know this feature. Does anybody have a Google Pixel phone or one of the new Samsung phones? I think definitely has this feature too. It's something called a magic eraser or an object eraser. So you have something in your picture, maybe somebody photobombed you, and you want to take them out of your picture. Or there's something lying on the floor. You took the perfect picture next to Taj Mahal and there is garbage lying on the floor next to you. And obviously it's not great, right? So you want to remove the garbage from your picture. So when you remove that signal artificially, so when you delete the garbage from your picture, what are you going to replace it with? Because that's going to create a large hole in your picture. It's going to be empty now. What are you going to replace it with? So you have some missing data, and that problem, the algorithm behind Samsung's object eraser or Google's magic eraser is called inpainting or interpolation. Again, we'll talk about it later if there's a need for it on one of the projects. People are leaving the call, so I am getting nervous. So I'm going to probably skip convolution. Um, okay, so uh, okay, now I don't know if you've Fourier transforms are actually one of the key things in signal processing. It's very, your like everything, your computer, your phone, without you knowing it, is taking Fourier transforms all the time. And this goes on in the background. But you're engineers. If you're a 70-year-old grandma or grandpa, I don't care. You just got to use your phone. Use your phone. But if you're an engineer, learn what your phone does, for instance. Why is it so cool? Because it can do something called a Fourier transform. That's one of the things. Well, it does a million other things, but this is one important thing. Where you have a signal, what I used to call x in the previous slides, let me call that x is now a function of t. So that's your f of t. Time, t is time. So when you're taking a video, your picture keeps changing based on time, which is the whole concept of a video, because a video is a two-dimensional picture, um, which has a height and a width, and then it keeps moving in time, which is what makes it a video. So you have many signals that are functions of time, and then when you take a Fourier transform of a function called f of t, you have this form. Again, I think I'm going to skip this because I guess you guys might be more interested in machine learning, I think. So just to understand your math skills, let me stop here for a second. I want to volunteer who can, or okay, let's do this. We still have a few minutes left. If this is the only, okay, we have just a few more slides, but I just want you to be comfortable with this because going forward in life, you're gonna do a little bit of this. If you get bored and say, I don't want to do this, this is not the place for you because that's not what this is about. You're going to be uncomfortable. That's the only way you're going to learn. The good thing is, though, this is not really a VTU exam, so you don't have to memorize all that 45 million different things and put them on paper and then wonder if the person who's grading your exam will understand it, right? Um, okay, look at this slide and just stare at it for a minute. I'm not going to go over all of this because we're not going to use this. This was one of the very important techniques that people used to use maybe 10, 15 years ago. And now because machine learning's on the scene, nobody uses this anymore, which is a pity. But the idea behind PCA or principal component analysis is you have a multi-dimensional signal, not just two dimensions. So right now on the screen, the example you have is a two-dimensional signal. So what this signal, look at the signal, the way it is, you see all those dots. And if you look at it very quickly, it kind of looks like a very thick line that somebody has drawn going from bottom left to top right. It's a diagonal line that's being drawn. And there are two axes. The axes are marked on the actual plot, on the graph. And these axes are orthogonal to each other. They're perpendicular to each other. So if you have n dimensions in general, n can be whatever number, n can be 200 if you want, except that after n equals 3, you can't visualize them in your head anymore because we live in a 3D universe and our brains they can only visualize 3D. But mathematical signals can be 4D or 5D, doesn't matter. It can be anything. So let's imagine there is a 2D example. You have a bunch of points. What I'm trying to say is along one axis of this, you have the majority of all the points spread. On the other axis, it's not very important because it's very narrow. So if you want to reduce the dimensions of this image, here's why it's important. Your computer and your smartphone, they have limited processing power. Um, do you guys ever think about what computer chip your phone's using? If you have a Samsung phone, they typically end up using some sort of and the rest of the in the US, historically they use something called a Snapdragon processor. Snapdragon processors are developed by this company called Qualcomm, and they can perform many million operations per second. And they have multiple cores and so forth. In India and some other parts of the world, Samsung used this other kind of chip called I think they developed this in-house, not by Qualcomm. Samsung developed them themselves, called Exynos, which is a little different in architecture. Apple uses its own chips. So all your phone, as amazing as it is, it comes with a limited computing power. by limited, I don't mean it's less, I mean it's finite. It's not infinite. So if you have a very complex signal, it takes a very, very long time to analyze something. As an example, again, let's go back to you take a picture, and then right after you take your picture, you want to look at how you look, right? You just took a selfie, and you want to look at that selfie because you look good. Maybe you didn't maybe your expression's not great. So you want to take 24 more pictures until you get it right. I don't know what you guys do. I don't know what 20-year-old people do anymore. But whatever you do, you want to look at that picture right away. Because I said your picture is being processed for denoising and deblurring and de blah blah blah, despeckling, you name it, improving the contrast, improving your HDR, which is high definition. No, wait, high dynamic range. There you go. So it's doing so many operations after you click the shutter button on your camera. And then in less than 1 second, you can view it in your album. Now, these pictures have millions of pixels. I told you, 12 million pixels. A lot of times that sets your dimensionality. It's a very high dimensional picture. Although it's 2 dimensions on your screen, and the way computers process them, they look at multiple dimensions of these pictures. So you want to reduce the number of dimensions in your signal because that's going to help with computing efficiently. Otherwise, every time you take a picture, you've got to wait 30 minutes for that picture to appear in your album so you can take a look at it. You'll go crazy because this is 2023. Nobody has the patience to wait. Everything's instantaneous. When I was maybe 10 years old, and you guys weren't born yet, I guess, we used to have this old internet connection called dial-up. And ask somebody about it if you don't know what it is. It's too embarrassing. Right now, you don't even understand what it is. Your phone has more compute power and it's faster than what my old computer used to be when I was 10 years old. And the internet connection is so fast. So people don't have time for anything. You just want everything now, now, now. So okay, that's not magic. Something has to happen. What happens inside computers when you say, I want everything now, is it has to process this information very efficiently and it wants to reduce the number of dimensions on signals. The unimportant dimensions are kind of ignored. Okay? So this is one 2D example, which is effectively converted to 1D, and these are the equations for it. What we're going to do, there is a mistake in this, which is um, there's one typo, which is in the last equation. I'll talk more about it later, some other time maybe. We have maybe 10 minutes left, so I'm not going to go into the mistake on the slide is, I don't know if you can see my arrow, but the small x, so you have W transpose XW. You don't know what any of these are because I haven't explained them to you. But because I'm going to probably send these slides over so you can look at them later and get uncomfortable with them. And the small x should be a capital X in the last equation. So we'll talk more about it later. But okay, there is frequentist estimation and Bayesian estimation that are also important to most of your so both of these concepts come from what's called estimation theory, which is sort of a branch of signal processing, you could say. And this is the foundation. This slide here, slide number 19, is the foundation for modern day machine learning. Almost every neural network, you're hearing my voice almost without any distortion right now. And frequentist estimation is the basis for it. It's happening in these machine learning algorithms using on voice over IP modules, VoIP modules, which is converting my voice and putting it on your speaker. It's using a frequentist estimation. And as an engineer, you need to be proud that you can actually understand the first step to doing anything great is to understand the nuts and bolts of everything. So when you're working with Ikigai on the project series, I don't care too much about definitions. You can forget everything as long as you learn how to look at an equation or understand a situation and bring them down to some analytical tool. You don't need to remember anything, but you've got to learn how to analyze things. So what a frequentist estimation? Okay, I'm not going to go into the equations today because I guess it's a little too much for now. But I will say this. I did ask a question about bias and variance on a random forest algorithm in the exam, in the first exam. I'm not going to ask the same question again, but it's in general, these are good to know. One of your homeworks is to go back home and read about this one word called expectation or expected value. This E here you see in the bottom two equations on the page. The E is an expected value. Expected value means basically the mean of the signal. Mean is an easier way to understand mean is the average. That's not true though. That's not fully true. It's only approximately true. And okay, so in this course, every single thing we understand and we read and we say, we're going to be precise about it because this is going to transform the way you think. I'm going to emphasize that a million times because when you start writing mathematically precise things, when you when you look at a situation around you in the world and you're trying to solve that problem, for instance, it's a very cool thing like making a new restaurant. That's one of the other projects. I don't know if you're going to end up doing that. It depends on how many people are interested. Where you have a restaurant, you send the restaurant a recipe, and they can make whatever you want approximately. They might not have an ingredient or two, and they'll have to substitute it with something else. That's the concept restaurant I have in mind because that would be cool. I live I live in Tennessee for the most part, sometimes in California. And if I when I live in Tennessee, the Indian restaurants here are absolutely terrible. And I don't have time to cook every day. And so what happens is I have weird cravings some days. I wake up and I want to eat a pakoda or something, okay? I really want it. It's raining outside. I want it. And nobody here knows how to make that damn thing. So my dream restaurant is when you crave something, if you can snap a recipe from the internet and send it to them, they'll make it for you. So the technology that goes behind it, you need concepts like frequentist estimation and bias and variance. So this is not your grandma's bullshit story. Okay, this is real stuff. Okay, so um I'm just trying to, I guess because we have very little time left, I'm just trying to motivate you that all of this is not something theoretical. You'll end up using it. Anyway, so I'll give you one example of frequentist estimation versus Bayesian. We're not going to go into Bayesian today at all, but the general idea is if you're making an inference just 100% based on what you see, in this case, Y is what you see. That's what you measure. And Y is distorted. We talked about distortion. Y has missing information in it. It's noisy, it's blurry, it's unreliable, what have you. That's what you see in the real world. And then X is the clean signal that you don't see directly. It's hidden away, but you can derive X from Y by inverting this. So when you say, okay, this the N symbol you see at the end, that's not an N. It's the Greek letter called eta. Uh, okay, that's noise. You can call it N if you want. I don't care what you call it. But that plus N symbol, that's noise. So forget about noise for a second. And then let's say you just have Y equals F sub theta of X. You can even forget about theta for now, okay? We'll talk more about it when the project starts. You don't have to worry about theta. Let's say you have something like Y equals F of X. You have Y, That's what you measure. You have an idea of what this function f is. For instance, if you know for a fact that you shook your hand while taking a picture, your f represents something called a blur matrix, or it's a blurring operation. So what this means is when you take a clean image, a very sharp image x, and then you apply some blurring on it by f of x, you get the blurry image y. But the interesting thing is, in all of these machine learning algorithms, you want to compute x, not y. So what you do is you want to invert f on y to get x. So essentially, it looks like we can rewrite that equation approximately to say x equals f inverse of y. That's simple enough. But computing that f inverse mathematically a lot of times is just not possible. There's one example of how you can compute um, an inverse, but so I'm not going to go there. But that's the goal of most of these machine learning algorithms, is you want to compute x as f inverse y, and there are many techniques to do it. Oftentimes, so when you're writing Python code, if you're more of a programmer and you don't want to get into the math or the details of it, that is fine too. Because in Python, you just say import, I don't know, like gradient boosting classifier. And then you type in three more sentences on your Jupyter notebook or your wherever you're going to write your Python script. And it does this for you. But my aim for you is also for you to understand what it's actually doing on the inside. So when something breaks, this is how you distinguish yourself from other engineers who just go to Kaggle and download a data set and download somebody's code, modify three sentences in that code, and they call themselves data scientists. This was bullshit. I mean, they've got to be ashamed of themselves. I mean, does that bring you happiness? I don't know. It shouldn't, because you guys are smart. So I'd like you to understand what's happening on the inside. So if something goes wrong, we are also working on ambitious projects, which means you'll have to modify certain fundamental things about these algorithms. And that's what I'd like you to be able to do, because by the end of it, you're going to be 100 times better than somebody who did not put the effort to learn all of this. So, I'm going to send you more. I'm going to send you one or two videos, and I'm going to definitely ask some questions based on those videos. Maybe one lecture of Andrew Ng's video or something like this. We'll see, but it's not going to be terribly complicated, and hopefully this exam's going to be different. But I'd like you to think I'm going to make the exam a little simpler, but not. It's still going to be a proper. It's still going to be a proper exam because you guys need to know. But my intention is not to make it hard. Like I said, I can give you all the resources. You're free to look at Google. You know, what else can I say? How many exams have you taken where you can access Google? So that's me being reasonable because I don't believe in memorization. Hopefully I motivated you a little as to why some concepts and why these might be important for everything that happens in modern day machines. But I'm okay. So on the exam, I'm not going to ask a question about this slide, for instance. That's not fair because we did not really talk about it. I'm going to ask some really simple questions where you just think a little bit, even if you might not know a concept, but I'll introduce the concept in the exam in the question paper, so you have some idea, and then I'm going to reduce the number of questions so you have more time to answer them. And then instead of 90 minutes, it's going to be 2 hours, so you're not really time crunched. Okay, I'll stop. Do you guys have any questions at all? Okay, so let me ask you something just blatant. I'm just gonna get to the point. Um, okay, I'm gonna send some resources for the preparation for sure. Absolutely. Um, I would just if just for basic human respect, okay? I would like everyone on this call to in the chat put in a one if they're really interested. Nobody's asking you to do this, and nobody's asking me to do this. Uh, I am unpaid. If you want to do this, put a one. If you don't want to do this, put a zero. So it saves my time and your time. Even if you don't want to do it, say zero so I can see. And it's perfectly okay. Okay, so far I'm seeing a lot of ones, which is good. Okay, uh, that's quite a few responses, I think. So I see a lot of ones, which is okay, which is good, which is great. Now, in order for me to structure the rest of Ikigai, um, the project series and the exam, what would you what is there something that's exciting you guys about working on these things that's different from your normal courses? I just want to get a sense for what excites you so that we can do more of it. Um, because ultimately this is you guys are the stars of the project, not me. I hide in the background. That's very different from maybe what you're used to because you come onto the scene immediately in the projects, you assume roles, you take responsibility for what you're going to do. I sit in the background and I support you. I come up with some ideas and we'll talk about it. You come up with ideas. Either way, we'll talk about it. But you guys are the stars of the project. So, I just want a couple examples. I need to hear your voices, okay? It's unfair. You've been hearing my voice for an hour now. So I want to hear how you guys sound. Just adding a voice to your name. What are you guys excited about? What do you want to do on this project? Why is it different from I don't want this to be another chore for you, right? You already have your undergraduate students, so you have a big load. You take multiple courses every semester. It's not easy. And then you're also trying to have fun. Somebody says, okay, we're going to have a party. And then you're going to go to one of these fancy restaurants, have a couple drinks. I don't know. Not unless you're of legal age. I'm not asking anybody to drink, but I'm just saying. So you have your own lives going on. So what excites you about this? Okay, Disha, I appreciate it, but just we'll warm up a little. So I want to hear how you sound.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, that's much better.
Hmm. Yeah, so, so
So are you in your first year?
ye- yes, sir. I'm in my
Okay,
first year.
okay, good. Um, so good to have you. Yeah, let's open up a little so like you guys can feel a little more comfortable talking to me. We're going to do this a lot, especially when we break out into projects. We're definitely going to be talking a lot, and I need you to be able to speak your mind. Okay, who else wants to go? Just say what just introduce yourself, and say why you're interested or what you're interested about. Maybe everybody's different, right? Some people might absolutely hate math. That's okay. It's totally okay. I don't like everything, but so that way, like when you guys come on the project, I know what I can ask you to do. Maybe there's something, maybe you like politics. You don't like any of this shit. You like politics. That's fine. And then you're probably gonna work on the liaison team and get things moving. I don't know. So we'll figure out a place for everybody. But as long as you open up a little and tell me.
Hi, sir.
Hi.
Hi, sir. Myself Pranshu.
Hi, nice to meet you. Okay. Tell me more.
Yeah, sir. So basically, previously I worked as a blockchain developer.
That's
So
amazing. Uh-huh.
and wrote a research paper regarding integration of blockchain and AI.
Uh-huh.
So now I want to move to this data science thing.
Yeah. There is
So
a place
that's
for
why,
you. Yeah.
yeah. So that's why I'm doing this.
Right, that's excellent. Because based on your background, Pranshu, it sounds like you're a good coder. You enjoy coding. Um,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
yeah, so we would love to have people like you on our project. And um so you later on when we map you to a project, at that point you should tell me what part of it you want to work on. You could either work on the data engineer. You said you want to work on data science in this case. So you're going to be exposed to some machine learning algorithms and how to implement them and compare different ones, pick one to use based on your particular needs, and that's going to be invaluable. So after graduating from BMS, when you want to be a machine learning engineer or a scientist, it's going to be invaluable if you have good coding skills, which I think you do based on what you said, and you understand how these algorithms work, and then you implement them. Yeah, you're going to be invaluable to these companies. So yeah, welcome.
Yes, sir.
Who wants to go next? A couple more people. That's it. I'm not asking for much.
Hello, sir. I'm Arushi.
Hi.
Actually, I'm from electronics department, and AI is a completely new topic for me. So that's what interests me at something new to try because I'm just in my second year and I don't want to limit myself to just electronics.
Absolutely. You're the kind of person we want. That's exactly the kind of person we want, where you don't want to limit yourself. So the idea, I'm going to go a little bit on a philosophical spiel because that made me happy. Um, so the idea behind, so we got our education system in India from the British who ruled us, right? Obviously, we thought everything they did was cool, and which is not true. But and so they have their undergrad is 3 years long and ours is 4. So that was a deviation from what they used to do. Even to this day, if you look at undergrad programs in England or the UK, the vast majority of them are 3-year programs, and that's because if you're in electronics like you are, or let's say you're in physics, or let's say you're in creative writing, you take all the subjects and courses in specifically in that area, and you don't do anything else, and so you can squeeze everything into 3 years. That's their philosophy. So the American philosophy is kind of very different. What we do here is have the first year is completely open, and you study a variety of things, and then you declare the subject that you're most interested in. The Indian version of this is, I think, a little more like American. So you do mechanical engineering or chemical engineering. You take all of these subjects in your first year, regardless of what branch you're in, right? But the only problem is it's not implemented well. And so what I'm trying to say is, if you have a curiosity for other things like AI, like you said, being in electronics, I think this is like a really nice playground for you to explore. And this is the time for you to think about what you really want to do. Because nobody's even in real life, I hope nobody's forcing you to do anything. So you better do something that brings you the most happiness, right? And this is definitely a place where you can explore. Um, I am very strict when it comes to certain things. Like, I like to be very precise about things when we work, but that's about it. But apart from that, I'm not a horrible person. Most of the times I'm smiling. I don't know how to well well, the thing is, I'm not strict in like a BMS sense. I'm just strict because I truly care about what you want to do. So from that sense, I do care. But you'll have a lot of freedom to explore what you want to do and find your way in one of the teams. Um, okay, that's excellent. Welcome. Okay, one more person. We can do this.
Sure, I had a question.
Who's this? I can't see. Oh, Disha. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm quite a beginner. I've not ever touched data science, but I do know a little bit of coding. I've
Uh-huh.
done coding in my UC and like a little bit of that in college as well. So what do you think would be a good field for beginners like myself to choose? Because there are lots of first years in this call.
Oh, yeah. I noticed that. Um, Firstly, I want to say well, thanks for the question. That's very valid. Let me answer that firstly by saying, because, oh, just on the exam, don't do your best on the exam. Don't worry too much about it. Okay? This is not a freaking VTU exam. And these exams are meant to be low scoring, and that's fine. So even if you're a first year, you haven't taken many courses, my exam's kind of a little wacky, right? Because it's open book, but also there are some concepts you haven't seen before. So I just want to see effort on your side. My idea of success, by the way, is getting somebody into projects who are absolutely interested in doing it. And you're all smart people. Somebody knows more about something than somebody else. That's fine. The knowledge part we can change later. But I just want somebody who's driven, who wants to be here, who's happy to be here, and then wants to do something very, very cool. And then we'll bring them on the project, and then give them a platform to grow together. Okay, so that's a small spiel. It doesn't answer your question directly. Um, the answer to your question for somebody who's a first year who is not exposed to a lot of these things are rapidly going to change. That's one thing. So you'll be surprised once you start working on the projects how quickly you'll learn certain things. The other thing is, I would actually caution. I was recently thinking about this because I'm also a faculty at the University of Tennessee. So I do meet, although I only teach PhD courses. So I don't meet a lot of students your age typically, but it helps to be a little broad. What I mean by that is, uh, five years ago, maybe 2018 timeframe, it was very clear to everybody your age that if they wanted to do AI, they would probably start first learn something like Python, which I would recommend. So you said you know a little bit of coding. I don't know how much you know. One good place to start is to do some Python coding. Um, Not a lot because you can always pick up more as on the project as you go. And then the other thing is, my recommendation is to learn some math, and that's the reason I am happy in my life and successful, sort of, I guess. But because it's so changing. In 2018, it was very clear to everybody that the future is going to be some sort of deep learning. Nobody could stop talking about deep learning. You look at, I mean, you've got to structure your life, right? Okay, you're doing a project series, that's fine. But okay, ultimately, what are you going to do with your life? What's going to pay you the big money? Um, what's your ikigai? Maybe that's okay, that's a pun on words. But what is something that makes you happy that you can get really good money for and so forth? And right now it's not clear anymore. And people are worried that ChatGPT and like these large language models are on the scene. So technology is changing really rapidly. So you can't really plan for something because by the time you graduate, things might have changed again one more time, or they might have changed multiple times by the time you graduate. So it's hard to predict. In general, I would say AI or machine learning is going to stay. What it's going to exactly look like, it's a little different. So when I was your age, I had to do all the coding myself. If you got stuck, you had some Google, and other people would have the same problem. So you kind of like talk to them online and see like how they figured out the solution to their problem. Now it's different because you can go to ChatGPT or Google Bard which are both free, and then you say, I need to do this. Can you write me a Python script or a Python program to do this? It generates actual code, which you can use. So that leaves you with the question, why should you even learn how to code? The answer to that is because you've got to learn how to be independent. Not everything you see online is correct. ChatGPT can make mistakes. And the more you're relying on technology, less of an engineer you are. So from that perspective, I think it's still useful to learn how to code. And generally speaking, one absolute skill you need, okay, you have 3 skills to be successful, I think. Learning to code, that's one. Talking to people, which is why I'm forcing you guys to talk to me. Even if it's non-technical, just, come say hi. That's not hard. So talking to people is very important. So you might have ideas in your head which are wrong, and when you say that to somebody, maybe I can correct you. Maybe you have an idea that's amazingly beautiful and you're doubting yourself, and then you tell me your idea and I'm going to tell you, I never thought about it that way. That's brilliant. Let's work on it. So unless you're comfortable talking to people, you don't get a feedback for your ideas. So that's another skill which is very overlooked. It's not a technical skill, but it's a social skill you're gonna need, especially at this age. It's the perfect time to develop that. You seem to be doing pretty well on that one. And the third one is super important. This is a technical skill where you look at a problem um, around you, right? It's a social problem. Can you convert it into a mathematical equation? Because at the end of the day, why I keep saying math, math, math is because all these algorithms are mathematical in nature. That is the language of computers. That is the language of nature. Like, for instance, your phone says it's going to rain tonight. Like, how the heck do you know? It knows because, like, meteorologists say it's going to rain. How do they know? Because they are actually solving differential equations on their computers. They design those equations and solve them using the computers. And these differential equations model the weather patterns. So you need to be able to look at something, at the sky, look at the clouds, and think in terms of, how do I represent that in an equation? Okay, fair disclosure, I can't do that. I cannot do that myself. I don't know how clouds work, but I'm just giving you an example. Pick your favorite thing. Maybe you get interested in cancer biology. This is recently one of my interests, that I want to try to cure cancer. Here's the thing, I'm not a biologist. My biology knowledge is very, very bad. And curing cancer, it's not a one person job to do. But that's how high you got to aim. And then what happens? Okay, so I'll give you an example of this. So maybe it's a little better with an example. Here's how you do it. Firstly, you don't do anything yourself. That period is gone. Everything is very collaborative. So you work in a group. So if you want to work on cancer, find a team who knows some biology. It's okay if you don't know anything or if you're not interested in it, that's fine. You bring a different strength. You bring machine learning strength, or you bring signal processing. You have a different strength. And the biologists, trust me, they want people like you because they don't understand signal processing, but they understand how proteins work. So when cancer happens in people, typically there is a protein in every human cell in the nucleus, next to the mitochondrion. It's called P53. P53 is a protein that um, tells your cell cancer happens when the cell divides uncontrollably. And that happens because the DNA in the body is mutated. So there are copy errors. So I'm just giving you one example of how to think. So this is a skill that you've got to develop right from your first year, to think very clearly in terms of, this is called the systems approach. Very clearly lay out how different things interact with each other so you can understand where you can come in and what you can work and what you can learn. Okay, so P53, what it does is your DNA, when every cell splits into two cells, that's normal. That's what the human body does. But the problem is when it starts dividing many, many times, many very rapidly. That's when cancer happens. Normal division is still fine. So the DNA splits into two copies, identical copies, and that has to be identical, right? Otherwise, you have a problem. So there are copy errors that happen. Um, so if you're in electronics, did you say you're in electronics, Disha?
No, sir, I'm in information science.
Okay, so I don't know. When you grow up, when you're in like your higher semesters, maybe there is a course on information theory. I don't know, because I was in the telecom department when I was an undergrad student. So I don't know. We had this course on information theory. I'm just showing you how you merge all these different areas, technical areas together to form one solution. And that's why it's so beautiful. Information theory has this idea that of something called, you can Google it up later. It's called error correcting codes. So you have an error, and there are some information theory codes that can correct the error themselves. So it's like self-correction of errors. The human body has something like this too, called error correcting codes on DNA. So when your DNA splits into two, um, and if there's a mistake in one of the copies, then the human body understands how to fix it for the most part. Sometimes the mistakes are so hard to find, or so massive that it cannot be fixed. So if a mistake is not fixed, so your P53 tries to see if that mistake can be fixed. If it can be fixed, it fixes it. If it cannot be fixed, the same protein generates a chemical that tells the cell, "Go kill yourself." Honestly, it's called cellular suicide, or so the technical word for it is apoptosis. So the cell kills itself because its DNA is so broken that it cannot correct itself. So if it cannot correct itself, there is a very high chance that cell could turn cancerous. So the human body uses P53, the protein, to instruct the cell to kill itself. Sometimes what happens is the P53 protein itself is broken. When that happens, the cell doesn't kill itself when the DNA is damaged, and then it can start dividing rapidly. That's when cancer happens. So one of the things that I'm working on with a collaborator, is, so we have something called the National Cancer Institute in the US. So I'm working with them to understand how to model mathematically how P53, the protein, works, so that when it breaks, here's what I want to figure out. When it breaks, what other part of your body gives you signals early on that P53 might be breaking? So observing P53 directly is very hard because it's inside of the nucleus of every cell. But it sets a chain reaction, right? Because everything is connected to something else. And then you see something slightly yellow on your skin, and then maybe that's proof that P53 is weak. I'm just making this up. That's not true. I'm just giving you an example. So if I can make that connection, that if a yellow spot on your skin means P53 is weak, that's excellent, because before somebody gets cancer, we can give them a concoction of a drug, or some sort of a medicine to strengthen their P53, so that it's like a vaccine so that people never get cancer. So solving cancer is important. Somebody who has cancer, we want to cure them of it. But also equally important, probably more important going forward, is to kind of enable people not to get cancer in the first place. So if they're that's why people talk
Hello,
about.
sir. I have a question.
Yeah,
So I'm Radhika.
yeah,
Sir, if we introduce P53 to the body
uh-huh.
and our estimation of it being deformed DNA is wrong,
Okay.
then it would mean that we are introducing more P53, which is causing cellular suicide, which is not good in itself as well.
Right. Well, thanks for the question. That's actually very valid. But P53, doesn't automatically cause cell suicide. It only causes it if the DNA in the cell is broken to the point that it cannot be fixed. P53 does not automatically kill cells. It's very, so this is where it's very logical in the sense that the first thing P53 does is it tries to see if the DNA can be fixed. That's the first priority. If it can be fixed, it'll fix it. If it cannot be fixed, only then it'll ask the cell to kill itself. So it doesn't go around in the body asking cells to kill itself. Because that would be disaster, because that would be worse than cancer. At least in cancer, people live a few years. If what you said keeps happening, then they'll be dead in like less than a day. So yeah, that's a very valid question, but that doesn't happen though. Yeah, okay, so Disha, back to your original question. I just gave you a long example of looking at a situation and bringing it down into a domain that you understand. Like I said, I'm not a biologist, but I still gave you this example. I am working on the mathematics of communication between cells and how P53 actually works. You can model P53 using some machine learning algorithms and create a digital version of it on your computer and then see how it works. So a great, very, very, very cool skill to have when you're this young is to be fluent in programming and math, both of them, so that whatever problem you look at, even if it's not your field, you can work with some people in the field and very quickly translate that problem into your domain, into an algorithm that you can work on. And then people will love you. I get more calls than I have time to work on because people want to work with that kind of a skill set. So that's, I think, a really good skill set to have. So yeah. Okay, there's a question from Pranshu. And okay, I'm gonna read it out. This is from Pranshu. So currently, I'm involved in coding and all, and have done internships in the development sector. However, I want to move to R&D. Could you please suggest a roadmap or provide resources on how to start? I just know how to do some hardcore math. Okay. So generally speaking, I'll be honest with you, although math is very important, like I said in the past 15 minutes, I couldn't stop talking about math. There are some people who absolutely hate math. You just don't like it at all. I don't understand it, but I know there are people like that. And so, math is not the only way. So, but I definitely encourage you to get into some math. Pranshu, if you work on the project, we will transition into an R&D kind of a job, right? At the end of it, you'll end up doing quite a bit of research. Research is just development at the core of it. Development is something where you take somebody else's idea and then you implement it. So if you're a good programmer, you can be a good developer, right? The concept R&D, so the R part, the research part, where it's a little different, is that there is no solution that somebody's giving to you. So in the development part, somebody solves a problem, but they're too bored to code. Somebody codes that. Now you're expected to come up with a problem and a solution to it. That's the R part. So as long as you're able to look at something like for instance, I looked at my grandma the last time I was in India, and I was like, she's almost deaf. I love that woman. She's deaf almost. And I need to shout. And like what about the quality of life? So that's a problem. You identify any problem that's dear to your heart, and then you try to solve it. Okay, how do you solve it? My solution to that was maybe thinking in terms of earpods or AirPods and how to convert them into hearing aids, which are much better than actual. Because I spoke to the hearing aid company that my grandma uses. They're terrible. I'll explain that more in a later call. But that process of identifying a problem and coming up with a nice solution for it, mathematical, using all these algorithms, that is, I think, a key part that contributes to the research aspect of it. And then once you have a solution, you still need to get a product out of it, right? Because I have wonderful equations on my computer. It's a perfect algorithm to solve it, but so what? Does it improve the life of my grandma? No, not unless somebody codes it, writes excellent code in Python or C++ or whatever. Or you've got to write Java code maybe for some Android programs, and then take a cheap piece of Lenovo or something or hearing earbuds and push your code into those earbuds using callback functions and make it work for your grandma. So that aspect of implementing the solution is the deep part. Both of them are really important. And so the roadmap is, yeah, just being interested in problems around you, coming up with the solution, and then implementing it. We're going to do all of them in our project series. Hopefully that answers some questions. Okay, so I've got another meeting, so I've got to go. So I think we'll stop here. You're free to talk to Rishita or somebody who has my email. If you have more questions, I'm definitely accessible. So you can send me an email, and we'll talk about it. But I'm just going to stop here for now.
Sure, sir. We'll share the details. Thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Sure. Well, thank you for your time as well. Yep. Hope you guys
Thank you
have
everyone for joining.
yeah, have
Yes.
an excellent evening.